Hey, Billy, I heard you were making your own cheese at home now. How's that going?
I don't have a problem with maggots or anything, so.
Hello and welcome to the Grand Parade Podcast. I'm your host, Independent City Hall reporter, Matt Stickland, and I'm coming to you with what is a third intermission budget playoffs update. That is right. We have had not one, not two, but 3 budget adjustment list meetings, and there is one more to come, which will start on Wednesday morning at 9:30 a.m. However, here today, we're going to be talking about Monday's budget committee meeting, and I've led myself into the intro of my script incorrectly, so here's some redundancy that I hope I can fix in editing. Halifax Council's budget meeting on Monday, March 24th was a stinker, quite literally, and also because Council almost voted to make Halifax's poorest people just a little bit hungrier because of how Canadian governments divvied up their power and responsibilities. But the good news is that your odds of dying in a fire are going to slightly decrease in the next few years. Probably. Still, the bad news is that your taxes in 5 years are going to be astronomically more expensive than they are this year. You're not going to get any better programs and services for those crazy high taxes because that money will have to go to debt or other previous commitments because this council just can't stop themselves from making terrible fiscal decisions. In the Canadian Premier League, the team which has the worst season and finishes in last place gets a quote-unquote award called the Wooden Spoon. And it's quote-unquote awarded to the team that sucked the hardest and who were consistently the worst team throughout the season. Monday's debate was so bad that I've decided to start awarding wooden spoons to the councillor who most earned it during that day's debate. And folks, we have our first winner. So now, let's dig in. First up, Councillor Catherine Morse put a motion on the floor to get better collision data in the HRM. This won't have any effect on the tax rate because it won't cost any money. This won't cost any money because staff were planning on buying the needed software next year, so the money is already in the budget. Money. Actuarial accounting. That's a list of 2 things that are definitely real. Councillor Sam Austin got a heritage planner added to the budget because Councillors Patty Cuddle, Kathy Daigle-Gammon, Nancy Hartling, David Hensby, Virginia Hinch, Catherine Morse, Jean St. Amand, Janet Steele, and Laura White wanted to see our heritage planning completed before the year 2085, which is the current estimate of when the heritage planning will be completed without any new planners. Speaking of 2085, based on our current policy implementation, we're projected to be at over 3 degrees of global warming in 60 years, so that is pretty neat. After the Heritage Planner debate is when Councillor Janet Steele really started to earn her wooden spoon when she put the just food spending on the floor to be cut. With a few minutes of backpedaling preamble, here is Steele putting a motion on the floor for the committee to consider letting Haligonians go hungry to save you, on average, less than $2 in property taxes.
Thank you, Chair. I am going to raise an under that I'd like to talk a little bit about before I bring up the motion. It's a motion for a budget change. It's not an under. I've seen a lot of discussion about food security and about affordability. And food security is, before I put my motion on the floor, I just want to say it's really important. And it's really important that levels of government engage with this. We here in Nova Scotia have a very high child poverty rate, and food security is super important. I am encouraged, though, recently. I see that the Nova Scotia government has invested very heavily in a school food program in partnership with the Government of Canada, and I think that should begin to address some of the issues that we have. In terms of our Just Food Security program, Just Food program. Part of the reason why we engaged in this is to do with food security and also to work on culturally appropriate foods, particularly for our Indigenous and African Nova Scotian communities. In doing a bit of research, and I think some of you will know I spent my career with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, in doing a bit of research, I looked at all the sources of funding for food security and to address things like community gardens and some of the other work that's involved with food security and culturally appropriate foods. I found a number of programs, a number of programs that are being offered by the provincial government. For example, Communities, Culture and Heritage has a community food access and literacy program. The Department of Opportunities and Social Development, formerly Community Services, has the Collaborative Food Network programming where they've just announced some funding for some communities. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada has the Local Food Infrastructure Fund, specifically targeting Indigenous and Black populations across this country. Under the Canadian Sustainable Agriculture program, there's a Bridge into Agriculture program offered through Dalhousie University, which targets African Nova Scotian residents for a 22-week program, which provides not only the seeds and transplants, but the tools to become involved with agriculture. That's entirely free. I could go on. There's the Edible Trees program. There's a well-supported national agriculture in the classroom program as well. So with that context, I'll introduce my motion, if I can find it here. Okay to go ahead? That the Budget Committee amend the motion to direct the Chief Administrative Officer to finalize the 25-26 operating budget, capital budget and 4-year capital plan for Regional Council, incorporating a decrease of $682,500, reducing funding in the Just Food Action Plan.
For a little bit of history on the Just Food program, when the Department of Public Safety was first being stood up 2 years ago, as part of their work, they created the Just Food program. They created the program because studies have shown that when people are hungry, they do more crimes. So feeding people would decrease crimes. The newly created department didn't have enough money for the just over $2 million required to launch the program fully, so they funded $1.5 million out of their budget and asked Council for the rest, about $600,000, as a budget over. Last year, Council decided not to fund Just Food to save us about $2 in taxes. But because Council approved the Just Food program in the Department of Public Works budget a few years ago, staff still have to try and find the rest of the funding. That's why last year's rejected budget over came back again this year. Council approved the program, and now it needs to approve the funding. However, Mayor Andy Fillmore argued for making people hungry, saying that
a massive chunk of that budget, 64.25%, is going to salaries. Okay, so of the $865,000, $550,000 is going to salaries. A rule of thumb in the not-for-profit sector is around 15% should be going to management and salaries, not 65%. This is a very bloated program.
And as we all know, the saying goes, give a man a fish and he'll be fed for a day, but teach a man to fish and that teacher will have to draw a salary. So it's obviously better to keep buying fish so that man remains dependent on government handouts for his survival. However, Steele's motion was best debunked by Councillor Sam Austin, who went on a reductio ad absurdum tear to dismantle the argument Steele made in support of the cut. It's a bit of a long clip, but here's Austin's takedown of Steele.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. And so I really just want to emphasize, so in my district, I can think of two projects that come to mind on the Dartmouth Common that had community engagement and buy-in, right? We created a disc golf course and we did a splash pad there, and there was lots of community involvement for that. We also have a garden, community garden, and an oven and an orchard. So why would it be that we wouldn't support recreation? Because I mean, gardening is recreation. It's building community. It's outdoor exercise. It ticks all the boxes for what we would look for in terms of parks and recreation. So that isn't not within our wheelhouse. That is very clearly part of the core stuff that we do. Virtual resources. So if you go down the library, you can get help on all kinds of things. You can get help like filing your taxes, which of course isn't us, like, your federal or provincial income taxes. So to have virtual resources to help people navigate for food, like, why wouldn't we do that when we're providing this stuff for other things? Community developers. If you want to create a nonprofit, you'll have someone like Darren Hurdle or, any of the folks in Parks and Recreation. They will help you set up a nonprofit, whether it's clearly in a municipal wheelhouse or not. They'll walk you through that because we recognize that that is a benefit to our municipality to have that, to have an active and engaged community, that it's worth us having resources, even if it's not directly into our mandate. We offer community grants, and some of those grants are bang on our wheelhouse, and some of them, they're in that gray area. So we do grants. When there's an emergency, it's our police, fire, it's the Metro Transit bus that's coming. We're responding. So why wouldn't food be part of that? If we have a public meeting for a planning department, meeting for an application, what's in the back of the room? A tray of muffins and other stuff to make sure that people are not hangry, besides being angry about whatever else we're trying to do, as part of that. The library, they give away tons of food. There's parts of this program that, maybe that's straying a little. But I think, if there's real deep concerns about this program, we should have a dedicated, committee of the whole, go through the program, say, what do you like that's in our wheelhouse? What do you not? There's a baby we're throwing out with the bathwater here if we got this whole program. I've heard some of the kind of things about, the program being top heavy or, salary based. Well, you need people to do work, right? Work doesn't get done by non-people. So I would just ask, because I've managed to fill up most of my time here in rhetorical flourish.
And believe it or not, this vote tied 8-8. The good news is, in a tie, the motion fails, which means the funding was not cut. Councillors Sam Austin, Patty Cuddle, Kathy Daigle-Gammon, Virginia Hinch, Becky Kent, Catherine Morse, Laura White, and John Young survived this vote with their integrity intact. Mayor Andy Fillmore, Councillors Billy Gillis, Nancy Hartling, David Hensby, Tony Mancini, Trish Purdy, Jean St. Amand, and Janet Steele took major hits to their integrity when they voted to make hungry Haligonians just a little bit hungrier because feeding people might not, strictly speaking, be a municipal responsibility. Jumping around a little bit, Halifax is going to cut 3 green bin pickups this summer to save just over $400,000. Halifax Fire is going to get 10 new firefighters, on top of the 10 already in the budget for a total of 20. We need firefighters because as the city grows, response times are going down, and thanks to congestion, speed humps, and lack of funding, response times are getting worse. These new firefighters will increase the amount of stations with 2 fire trucks on standby, which should decrease response times throughout the HRM. Remember in the last episode when we talked about the consequences of the police's occupational health and safety complaint, and council being forced to buy the APC, the armored personnel carrier, due to that complaint? Now, I know Navy firefighting and Civvy firefighting is different in a lot of ways, but one thing that's true in a fire is that safety comes in numbers. It's irresponsible to send people into dangerous situations without the proper backup. There's a very strong argument to be made that if there aren't enough firefighters to meet the minimum standard response times, then it's not safe for the first crews on scene to go in. If council had not approved these firefighters, or even if these firefighters aren't enough to meet minimum standards, the firefighters likely have an OHS complaint, an OHS case to compel the city to hire more firefighters. 10 firefighters cost the city about $2 million a year once they're fully trained, so hiring more firefighters is expensive. But remember,
there is no obvious upper limit on the expenses that an officer can require an employer such as HRM to go to provide a safe workplace.
Speaking of no upper limit, Halifax's firefighting gear is lousy with cancer-causing forever chemicals known as PFAs. PFAs are used because they're good fire retardants. Firefighters are still okay with using these carcinogenic safety suits because non-PFA suits are still a bit less safe in a fire. But as technology gets better and non-carcinogenic suits become safe enough to wear in fires, Halifax's firefighters will need a complete new set of bunker gear. Quick internet searches put the price of bunker gear at about $4,000 per set, and Halifax Fire budget documents put the number of employees and volunteers that would need a new set of bunker gear at about 1,000 people. We're looking at about $4 million in new gear. But man, it sure is good, that.
There is no obvious upper limit on the expenses that an officer can require an employer such as HRM to go to provide a safe workplace.
Halifax Regional Police's new toy might go down in history as the most expensive armor personnel carrier ever purchased. But now we're at the part of the debate where Councillor Janet Steele really earned her wooden spoon. And it all started when Councillor Laura White put a motion on the floor to raise parking fees by 25%. This motion ended up failing, but may come back on Wednesday. In fact, paid parking really has to come back on Wednesday if Council doesn't want to make themselves lying hypocrites. But we'll get to that. Councillor Sam Austin objected to White's motion because it's unfair to downtowns. He does want to end parking subsidies, but he thinks we need to do it differently. I'll let Austin himself explain.
So I'll just say where my headspace is on it, right? You know, I'm not against the idea of raising parking, but my difficulty on it is it's a charge that is specific on the downtowns, right? Like, you know, you can park for free out at IKEA and in the business parks. And so, you know, we did hear from our business community, some of the downtown entrepreneurs. There's one or two from downtown Dartmouth that came by and took the time to present to us and, you know, talking about their tax rate. I don't think they're not going to love the idea of parking being on top of that. And so when I was thinking about like, well, what would make sense here, you know, I could be on board with this if we're either reducing the downtown tax rate and shifting some of that burden, because we do have the commercial tax tier, out to the places that don't charge for parking, so that the burden is equally spread. Or I could also go for, you know, I did see one of the other permutations, if it's okay for me to talk about it, I'm getting a head nod, about having a downtown, like, you know, the parking revenue going into a fund specifically to be reinvested in those areas, a parking benefits sort of district, which is something that other cities have done. So, you know, I could kind of go with either of those, but, you know, just kind of hitting downtown with $1 million, not having anything that then lands on you know, the competitors where there's free parking, which also tends to be where all our big multinationals are concentrated, many of our American chains. I don't know if I can do that, right? You know, I like the idea, but I'd like a little bit more of a complexity just to, you know, kind of spread this so it's not just the downtown that ends up paying.
Between Sam Austin and unexpected rural allies like David Hensby, who said things like this.
Thank you much, Madam Chair. I'll be supporting this because I believe that the bids also ask for more of a police presence. So how we're going to provide more police presence in our downtown core areas if we don't have alternative funding sources? You know, the last been having a cop shop in one of the, you know, perhaps at the downtown library site as an opportunity to have that community police office and presence in the area. So we got to fund those things somehow, as well as the province now going to be providing free parking at the hospital sites. Parking is going to be at a premium around those hospitals. I can appreciate that, but the question is going to be is we still need to provide funding sources for our budgets and stuff. And also, you know, this change might also have a bit of a modal shift to people getting on the transit buses instead. You know, perhaps they can go to a free park and ride terminal, park their vehicles, and take the bus in town instead as an option instead of coming downtown. So it's a difficult decision. I appreciate the economics of it for downtown parking, but I think it's necessary.
And it becomes pretty clear that there's broad support in council for raising parking fees, and why I think it's likely we'll see something on Wednesday about using parking to raise revenue to cover the cost of automotive infrastructure maintenance. However, parking was opposed by other councillors with less good reasons. Janet Steele, you'll remember earlier when she argued that making people hungry and cancelling the Just Food funding was crucial because of the importance of adhering to municipal responsibilities. But here's what she said in opposition to paid parking.
Just on the mode share shift, if we had rapid and reliable transit until 8 p.m., and also on the weekends. But there's a big difference. I live 9.5 kilometers from here. It's a nice run. It takes a long time on the buses that are not peak buses. It can take 75 minutes. I can certainly run home in a lot less than that. So I think we're probably not ready to suggest that this is going to improve mode sharing, but it may provide us with some short-term revenue. I am concerned though about our businesses. They are suffering, and restaurants in particular came through a very bad time with COVID. They've had to pay back a lot of the federal program assistance that was available now. So I'm wondering if now is the time to hit them with this.
And let's just break down Steele's argument to see if that conflicts with the argument she made about cutting just food. First, let's talk about municipal responsibilities. There are two relevant municipal responsibilities in the discussion about paid parking. The first municipal responsibility that's relevant is that Halifax has to provide a transit service. In her arguments about parking, she explicitly makes the case that because council is failing to deliver its responsibility of transit, we should not increase parking fees. She also argues that businesses are struggling and raising parking fees might hurt their bottom line. Ignoring for a second that no studies have found this to be true as far as I know, saving local small businesses is not a municipal responsibility that's relevant to parking fees. Supporting local small businesses is not a legislated municipal responsibility at all. What is a municipal responsibility, and a relevant one, is road maintenance. And road maintenance is crazy expensive. If you add all of the Department of Public Works salaries that work on automotive infrastructure and all the planned capital spending for automotive infrastructure, you will find that our roads are going to cost us at least $1 billion with a B, billion, over the next 7 years. At our current user fee collection rates, we will collect about $50 million, or 0.05% of that $1 billion over the next 7 years. Road maintenance, as a reminder, is an explicit municipal responsibility. However, for that $1 billion, which will come out of your taxes, Halifax is expecting roads to be 60% good for a few minutes in the year 2032. In 2022, our roads were 60.6% good, which means our current plan is to spend $1 billion on road maintenance for our roads to be worse in 2032 than they were in 2022. Or, in simple terms, council is planning to spend $1 billion to fail to achieve a municipal priority. And at this juncture, it really can't be stated enough that according to the legislation that dictates municipal powers, also known as the HRM Charter, does not say, and has never said, that making sure people can drive everywhere is a municipal responsibility. That is a political choice that our council has been making for the past 70 years. The Charter does say that council has quote-unquote absolute control over the roads and that the city is responsible for maintaining them. It does not say we have to let cars use roads. It does not say we have to let cars use roads for free. But it does say the city has to balance the budget. So we do have to pay for everything, like roads, that we build. Which means if council actually cared about fiscal sustainability, municipal priorities, or keeping our taxes low, they'd end driving subsidies and start charging user fees and decrease the amount of road space they give to cars to keep their maintenance budget in check and transit buses running on schedule. Until our councillors start doing any of that, they're just not being honest with us or themselves about what their priorities really are. And for that reason, Janet Steele, congratulations on winning the Grand Parade's inaugural wooden spoon. It was very well earned. That'll do it for me today, and I've been remiss in mentioning it really helps this show if you rate and subscribe, or if you like it and share it. Tell your friends. let people know that they can get information about City Hall that isn't owned by Post Media. You can find this show in your podcast feeds, wherever podcasts are bought and sold for free. It will also be going up on YouTube shortly, but I still need to make the footage. YouTube listeners, something I'm really curious to know. Do you guys actually watch the videos? It's a little bit easier for me to just put a logo up there if you guys are just listening to the audio. But if you guys are enjoying watching me build a city, a medieval city in the game foundation, I'm happy to continue doing that too. But really, I don't know what draws people to YouTube to watch podcasts. So please let me know. I can be reached at Land of Sticks, wherever @signs are bought and sold for free, which right now is Instagram and Blue Sky. But that'll do it for me today. Bye!